Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take those topics you're just dying to really wrap your head around.
Yeah.
And we go deep. We peel back all those layers.
Totally.
For all those listeners out there who just crave those aha moments, those
Yeah.
little bursts of clarity where you feel like,
Light bulb.
yes, like you finally cracked the code
You got it.
and you can really connect all the dots
Exactly.
without
Getting bogged down in
Yeah.
other little details.
without drowning in all the minutia.
Yes, exactly.
Today's deep dive is particularly fascinating. And I have to say, the collection of material you sent our way, it's
quite a mix, yeah.
It is. It is.
But a good one.
Oh, yeah.
A really promising one.
We're going to be exploring the intertwined histories and theoretical frameworks of semiotics, structuralism, and photography.
Three big ones.
Three big ones. And you know what else is super cool? We're going to be looking at how photography's evolution, how it's changed over time, has really reshaped the world of art.
And not just art, but also like our whole visual landscape.
Exactly. How we see the world around us.
How we understand it.
The sources you've given us, they really are just begging to be unpacked. We have this Yale course's lecture transcript. It delves into the core principles of semiotics and structuralism.
Like the basics, right?
Yeah, the foundational stuff, the building blocks.
The frameworks we use to even begin.
Yeah, to make sense of how meaning is created and how it's transmitted.
Right, because that's what we're talking about. Right, like when we say semiotics, we're talking about signs. How do things become signs? How do we read them? How do we understand their meaning?
And it's not just some abstract academic thing either.
Oh, absolutely not. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
We're swimming in it.
We are. We are swimming in science. We've also got Harvard's incredibly detailed timeline, the history of photography,
Yeah.
laid out step by step.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love a good timeline.
Oh, me too. Me too. You can really see the progression, how things unfolded. And we have this really insightful article from The Collector. It's all about photography's impact on art.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how, the invention of photography didn't destroy art, but actually, pushed it forward in directions it might never have gone otherwise.
Totally. It's like this catalyst for change.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't forget that TEDx Vienna talk. Man, that was powerful.
So powerful.
Seeing how photography has literally shaped history.
Yeah. Not just documented it, but actually changed the course of events.
Amazing. And there's more. We've got a film and media studies transcript.
Ooh, this one's juicy.
It is. It focuses on Laura Mulvey's work on psychoanalytic film theory.
Yeah, that's going to be a deep dive into how we look at images, especially images of women, and how those ways of seeing are shaped by all these unconscious forces, a bit Freudian, you know?
It gets into all those deep-seated cultural and psychological dynamics.
Yeah, the stuff that's kind of operating beneath the surface.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then to round it all out, we've got some descriptions that help us understand visual culture. Like, what is it? How does it work?
How does it affect us?
Yes. And last but not least, there's a Rice Continuing Studies discussion that traces the evolution of photography.
Yeah, the whole arc from those early experiments to the digital age.
It's going to be quite a journey, and I think we're in for some really unexpected connections.
Wow.
So our mission, should we choose to accept it,
Always.
is to first really get a grip on these foundational ideas of semiotics and structuralism.
The tools we need
You
to
know?
understand how meaning works.
Then we're going to walk through photography's timeline from its very first moments to the digital age, and I think this is where things are going to get really interesting. We're going to investigate how these seemingly separate areas, semiotics, structuralism, photography, have actually influenced each other and shaped how we see art, how we see images, and how we understand visual culture as a whole.
And how we see the world, ultimately.
Lovely. Ready?
I am ready. Okay, let's jump right in. The Yale course's lecture. It introduces semiology as the study of existing conventional communicative systems. Now, when we talk about these systems,
What are we really talking about? Like, can you give us some real-world examples so people can really grasp what these systems are?
okay, so think about it this way. Any organized set of signs that we use to communicate, right?
Okay.
And to make sense of the world around us.
Yeah.
That's a system.
Right.
So, the most obvious example the lecture gives it to us is language.
Okay.
Human language.
Words, grammar.
Words, grammar, vocabulary. Yeah.
Right.
But it's not just that. Think about a mime.
Okay.
Right. A mime uses gestures.
Right.
Very deliberate gestures to tell a story.
Right.
Without words.
Okay, so that's a system.
That's a system. Or semaphore,
Oh, yeah, flags.
flags, coded signals, or even something like traffic lights. red, yellow, green.
Oh, that's a great example.
That's a system, right?
Yes,
We all know what those lights mean,
we do.
and we use them to navigate our daily lives.
To not get hit by a car.
Exactly, to survive.
To survive.
Yeah.
So it's really like a shared code then
It is.
that we all understand.
Like a secret language.
Yeah. It's semiotics. It's not just about these like obvious forms of communication.
It goes so much deeper than that.
The lecture mentions this idea of Darwinian semiotics,
Ooh, yeah.
which sounds
super interesting.
pretty wild.
It is.
So what's that all about?
Basically, the idea is that anything at all that transmits information
Okay.
can be analyzed as a system of signs.
Okay.
So in Darwinian semiotics, you might look at like the relationships between different species,
Okay.
how they communicate,
Through mating calls.
mating calls, warning displays, even the way an organism adapts to its environment.
Interesting.
That can be seen as a sign.
Oh, wow.
So it's like seeing the whole world as this constant exchange of signals, right?
Wow. And those signals, they have meaning.
They carry meaning.
So a big name in all of this is Saussure. The lecture talks about his concepts of Lang and parole. Can you break those down for us in a way that's like really easy to understand?
Okay, so Saussure, right. He's this Swiss linguist. It's kind of a big deal in both linguistics and semiotics.
Okay.
And he made this really important distinction between Lang and parole. So Lang, think of it like the overall system of language,
Okay.
the abstract system.
Okay.
It exists within a community of speakers.
Right.
So it's like all the rules, the grammar, the vocabulary that we all kind of know implicitly.
So Lang is like the blueprint of language.
Exactly. It's the blueprint.
Okay, so then parole is...
Okay, parole is like the actual act of speaking
Okay.
or writing. It's how we each use the Lang
Okay.
in specific instances.
Gotcha.
Like the particular sentences we construct, the way we pronounce words.
That's parole.
That's parole.
So Saussure is saying that Lang, this collective system, is what makes parole understandable.
Right. Without Lang, we wouldn't be able to communicate. It'd just be chaos.
We'd all be speaking our own little made-up languages.
Yeah, and nobody would understand each other.
So Saussure, he also had a very specific way of looking at what a sign actually is.
This is where it gets really interesting.
And it's not just a word and the thing it points to.
I mean, it's more than that. So for Saussure, the linguistic sign is like this two-sided thing.
Two sides.
Yeah, you've got the signified, which is like the concept, the mental image we have of something.
Okay.
And then you've got the signifier, which is the sound or the written form.
Right, the word itself.
The word itself, yeah. And he was adamant that these two, they're inseparable.
They're a package deal.
They're a package deal. You can't have one without the other.
Gotcha. And the relationship between these two sides,
That's the key.
it's arbitrary.
Right. That's what Saussure said.
What did he mean by that?
Okay, so the arbitrariness of the sign means that there's no natural logical connection between the signifier, the word, and the signified, the concept.
Right.
Like the example he uses is the word for cow.
Okay.
In English, it's cow. In German, it's och. In French, it's bœuf.
And there's no reason why.
No reason why one sound should be more naturally connected to a cow than another.
Right, it's just what we've decided to call it.
It's just convention. It's an agreement.
Wow.
Like, think about the word meow.
Okay.
It doesn't really sound like a cat, does it?
Not really.
Well, we've all agreed that that's the sound a cat makes.
That's the label we've attached.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this arbitrary relationship. And then the lecture, it also talks about the differential nature of meaning.
Okay, now we're getting into the really cool stuff.
And this sounds a bit more abstract, I have to admit.
It is, but it's so insightful. So Saussure is saying that signs, they don't get their meaning from some, like, inherent positive quality.
Yeah.
Their meaning comes from what they are not.
Okay.
It's all about difference.
So it's not about what a sign is, but what it isn't.
Exactly. It's defined by its difference from other signs.
And the red light example from the lecture, that really helped me understand this.
Oh, that's a great example.
Can you walk us through that again?
Totally. So we all think of a red light as meaning stop, right?
Right, at a traffic light.
At a traffic light.
Mm-hmm.
That's its positive value, but only within that specific system of a traffic light.
Okay.
But then imagine that same red light on Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer.
Okay.
Suddenly, it means something completely different. It means guide the way, lead us forward.
Right.
Or think about a red light above a street door. That might mean open, come in.
And a white light might mean closed.
Exactly. Context is everything.
Or in an auditorium, red means exit, green means stay put.
Yeah, and think about a Valentine's Day card. A flashing red light doesn't mean stop loving me, does it?
No, it doesn't. So it's the same visual signifier,
Mm-hmm.
but the meaning, what it signifies, changes depending on the system it's in.
Right. And what other signs are present.
Wow.
So the red light by itself doesn't inherently mean any of those things. It gets its meaning from its relationship to everything else.
Wow. It's all about relationships.
It's all about relationships. And the lecture quotes Saussure directly on this. He says, "Language is a system of interdependent terms in which the value of each term results solely from the simultaneous presence of the others."
So everything gets its meaning from everything else. That's wild.
It is. And he goes on to say that concepts are purely differential, defined not by their positive content, but negatively by their relations with other terms of the system.
So we understand red, not because it's inherently red,
Right.
but because it's not blue, not green, not yellow.
Exactly. We understand things by what they are not. It's mind-blowing.
Mind-blowing. Okay, so we've got a good handle on these core ideas of semiotics and structuralism.
Yeah.
Now let's bring photography into the picture, literally.
Time for some visuals.
Yes. So the Harvard timeline tells us that the first permanent photograph that survives to this day was created in 1826, and then the daguerreotype process.
That was a game changer.
Huge. It was announced publicly in 1839. This must have just, blown people's minds.
Oh, totally. Imagine, never before in human history could you capture a fixed image of the real world.
Mechanically. It's incredible.
It's magical almost. And the daguerreotype, it produced these incredibly detailed images on these silver-coated copper plates.
They were one of a kind.
Unique, each one.
And the Harvard timeline, it shows how quickly other innovations popped up after that, like William Henry Fox Talbot.
Oh, yeah, Talbot was another pioneer.
He came up with the photogenic drawing process.
And the calotype.
Different approaches.
Different ways of capturing an image. It was like a burst of innovation.
Amazing. And the collector article, it talks about how this just sent shockwaves through the art world.
Oh, yeah, the art world was not ready for this.
Because suddenly you could depict the world with this incredible accuracy.
More accurately than any painting.
What did artists think about this?
Well, it was mixed, honestly. Some embraced it, saw it as a new tool, like a new way to explore their art. But others, they were really critical.
Like Courbet?
Yeah, Courbet, the painter.
He didn't see it as art at all.
Not at all. Too mechanical, not creative enough.
But this realism.
It forced painters to think, okay, what are we even doing anymore?
Yeah, if a machine can do this, what's the point of just trying to paint realistically?
Exactly.
So it's like photography, by being so good at realism, it actually freed painting from that constraint.
It's a paradox, right?
It is. The collector article says this was a huge reason why painting changed so dramatically.
Oh, absolutely.
In the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
And that's when you start seeing these movements like Impressionism, Expressionism, Cubism.
They're all about exploring things that photography, at least at that time, couldn't capture.
Emotions, impressions, the subjective experience.
Right, the internal world.
Exactly.
The stuff you can't just point a camera at and capture.
That became the new frontier for art.
And beyond the art world, photography also had this huge social impact.
Oh, yeah. This is important.
The collector talks about the democratization of art that it brought about.
Because for the first time, art became affordable.
Yeah.
For ordinary people.
Portrait studios popped up everywhere.
Families could get their pictures taken. It wasn't just for the wealthy elite anymore.
Amazing. So some folks in the traditional art world,
they were not happy about this.
They saw it as a banalization.
Like a cheapening of art.
Right. But you can't deny it broadened access to visual representation for so many people.
Oh, absolutely. It changed the game.
In the Harvard timeline, it gives us this sense of how quickly photography is being used for all sorts of things.
Oh, yeah. It wasn't just portraits.
No. Botanical documentation.
Medical documentation.
They even use it to document surgeries.
Yeah. And then you've got lantern slides for entertainment, stereoscopes for 3D viewing. It was everywhere.
Wow. And new formats were being developed constantly. Ambrotypes, tintypes, carte de visite, cabinet cards.
It just exploded.
It's incredible. So let's talk about how photography specifically influenced art movements.
Yeah.
The collector focuses on Impressionism as the first movement to really engage with photography's existence.
Because they kind of had to, right?
Right.
Photography was this new force on the scene.
And what's so interesting about Impressionism is that these artists, they acknowledge photography's ability to capture that fixed objective image. They weren't trying to compete with that.
No, they moved in a different direction.
Exactly. They focused on capturing light, color, movement.
The fleeting effects.
Yes, the things that a photograph at that time couldn't really do well.
Right, with those long exposure times.
So painting was no longer about trying to perfectly mirror the world.
It was about capturing a feeling,
Yes.
a moment in time.
And the Collector article, it mentions expressionism and cubism as even further steps away from that traditional realism.
Yeah, they took it even further.
So expressionism, that was all about
Human emotion.
Yeah.
Subjective experience, using distorted forms, exaggerated colors, lines to convey these inner feelings.
And cubism.
Oh, Cubism was radical.
It was.
They completely blew up the idea of perspective.
With artists like
Picasso, Braque, they wanted to show multiple viewpoints at the same time.
Wow. And you can't do that in a photograph.
No, not at that time.
So it's amazing, right? Photography, by being so good at one thing, it pushed art to become something completely different.
It's like it gave art permission to break the rules.
And yet, as the Collector points out, photography itself had this long and difficult fight
Oh, yeah.
to be accepted as fine art.
It was an uphill battle.
A lot of people, they saw it as just a mechanical process.
It's not real art.
No creativity involved.
Right, just clicking a button.
But as photographers started experimenting more,
Mm-hmm.
Playing with abstract compositions, manipulating light and shadow,
Pushing the
pushing the boundaries,
or what photography could be.
then attitudes started to change.
Slowly but surely.
And having dedicated museum departments for photography.
Like the one at MoMA in 1940.
That was a big step.
A huge step.
Yeah.
It gave photography legitimacy.
So let's think about photography as a system of signs.
Okay, back to semiotics.
Back to semiotics.
Yeah.
Because the descriptions of visual culture that you provided,
Right.
they suggest that photographs are these communicative systems, right?
They are.
They convey meaning through these visual signs.
Just like language.
So a photograph,
Mm-hmm.
it's not just a neutral snapshot of reality.
Not at all.
It's embedded in a whole network of meaning.
The subject matter, the composition, the lighting, the angle, all of it contributes to what the photograph means.
And the meaning, it can change depending on who's looking at it.
Absolutely.
Right, based on their background.
Their culture, their experiences, their beliefs.
Right, like our red light example.
Exactly.
The same photograph could mean very different things to different people.
It's all relative.
Which brings us to this idea of photographic truth versus photographic fiction.
Oh, this is a tricky one.
The Rice lecture mentions this
It's a slippery slope.
because every photograph, even though it seems objective,
Mm-hmm.
involves choices.
Choices made by the photographer.
Right, like what to include in the frame,
What to leave out,
the angle,
the timing.
all these decisions shape the message of the photograph.
They shape the truth that it presents.
So it's never just a neutral representation of reality.
It's always a constructed reality.
And the TEDx Vienna talk by Ron Haviv, he gives some powerful examples
Chilling examples.
of how photography can actually shape historical events.
It's not just documenting history.
Making history.
It's making history.
He talked about the photograph he took of the beating of Vice President-elect Guillermo Billy Ford.
In Panama in 1989.
Yeah. And that photograph, it had this immediate impact.
It went viral even before the internet,
It became a symbol of the regime's brutality.
and it helped galvanize the opposition.
Ford himself, he said that photo might have saved his life.
Yeah, by bringing international attention to his situation.
It's amazing. And then there's that haunting photo from Bosnia.
The one with the Serbian paramilitaries and their victims.
Ugh, it's just chilling.
So disturbing.
And that photo, it became a recruiting poster for the Serbian forces.
Yeah, it's crazy how images can be used in such different ways.
It also inspired art and film, and even more importantly, it was cited as a reason to establish the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia.
And it was used as evidence to convict war criminals.
Wow. So these photographs,
They transcended their moment of capture.
yeah, they became part of history.
They shaped the narrative.
It makes you think about all the images we see every day.
On social media, on the news.
Right, and how quickly they're forgotten.
It's a constant stream.
But these photographs,
They endure.
they have lasting power.
And that power comes with responsibility.
Yes, because photographers, they have this incredible ability to shape how we see the world.
To influence public opinion, to document injustice, to bring about change.
Now, let's talk about feminist film theory.
Okay, a bit of a shift here.
But it's all connected.
It is.
The Film and Media Studies lecture, it introduces us to Laura Mulvey
Yeah, she's a big name in feminist film theory.
and her essay, Visual Pleasure in Narrative Cinema.
A classic.
It's all about how women are represented in film.
and how those representations reflect deeper power dynamics.
Mulvey, she uses psychoanalytic theory to unpack all of this,
Yeah, she draws on Freud and Lacan,
to analyze how we look at images, especially images of women.
and how those ways of looking are influenced by these, like, unconscious forces.
Right, so one of the key concepts she talks about is phallocentrism.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Can you explain what that means in this context of feminist film theory?
So phallocentrism, basically it means that the phallus, the male sexual organ, is like the central symbol of power, authority, meaning in our culture.
So it's like a system where the male perspective is dominant.
Exactly.
And Mulvey, she argues that this system relies on a very specific visual trope, the image of the castrated woman.
Yeah, that's a pretty intense phrase.
It is. So what does that mean exactly?
It goes back to this Freudian idea of castration anxiety.
Okay, so this is getting into some deep psychological stuff.
Deep, deep stuff.
So castration anxiety.
It's this unconscious fear that men have
Okay.
of losing their power, which is symbolically represented by the penis.
Okay.
And this fear, it supposedly arises when boys realize that girls don't have penises.
Okay.
So the castrated woman in this framework,
Right.
she becomes a symbol of this lack, of this absence,
Right.
which then reinforces the phallus as this ultimate symbol of power
Wow.
for men.
And the lecture also talks about how Lacan understands the phallus.
Yeah, Lacan takes it a step further.
And it's not just about the literal penis.
No, for Lacan, the phallus is the symbol of lack in general.
Of lack.
Yeah, like this fundamental sense of incompleteness that we all experience,
Okay.
especially when we're separated from our mothers as infants.
Okay, that's getting into some Freudian stuff.
Oh yeah, Lacan was all about Freud.
Yeah.
But the point is, the phallus is this symbolic representation of what we don't have, of what we desire.
And how does that connect to how women are represented in film?
Okay, so Mulvey argues that in mainstream cinema, women are often visually represented as embodying this lack.
So they're not seen as whole, complete beings.
No, they're defined by what they don't have.
Mulvey even calls women the bearer of the bleeding wound.
Yeah, it's a provocative image.
It is. And she's saying that women are often positioned as the signifier for the male other.
Meaning that their role is to define and reinforce male identity.
So their presence in the film is all about the male characters.
And their desires.
And this leads to her concept of the male gaze.
Right, the idea that the camera, the narrative, everything is aligned with the perspective of a heterosexual male viewer.
The men are the ones who look,
And women are the ones who are looked at.
often in a very objectified way.
Yeah, they're there to be looked at to provide visual pleasure.
So Mulvey is saying that women are the bearer of meaning, not the maker of meaning.
They're not in control of their own representation.
And this whole system, it perpetuates these patriarchal power structures.
It reinforces the idea that women are there to serve male desires and anxieties.
It's really eye-opening.
Yeah, it makes you see film in a whole new light.
Okay, so let's move on to the technological evolution of photography. The Harvard timeline highlights these key moments that made photography more accessible to everyone.
Yeah, like Eastman's roll film in the late 1880s.
Right, and the Kodak camera in 1888.
You press the button, we do the rest.
So simple.
It opened up photography to the masses.
And then the Brownie camera in 1900.
Even more affordable.
Yeah, that's when everyone started taking pictures.
Family photo albums were born.
The timeline also mentions aerial photography.
Oh yeah, that was a huge leap forward.
With the invention of the airplane.
Suddenly we could see the world from above.
Amazing. And then color photography in the early 20th century.
That changed everything.
It did. The Rice lecture talks about how color impacted artistic seeing.
It was a radical shift from the black and white world.
And photographers like Joel Meyerowitz, William Eggleston, Stephen Shore,
They were pioneers in color photography.
they really explored its possibilities.
They saw the world in a new way.
The Rice lecture also talks about this contemporary retro aesthetic in photography.
Yeah, why are we so obsessed with old cameras and film?
It's interesting, right? Like, why this pull towards these older styles and looks in our digital world?
Nostalgia, maybe?
may.
A longing for something authentic
Yeah, something real, something tangible.
in a world that's increasingly virtual.
And then the lecture mentions Peter Brown's Seasons of Life.
Oh, yeah, that book is fascinating.
It looks at this interplay between images and text.
How the text can change how we see the image.
Right, and it really makes you think about how truth and fiction are often blended together.
Yeah, especially in personal narratives,
And the Rice lecture brings up the ethical debates in photography,
which are more important than ever.
especially with social media and the internet. Expert